All right, hello and welcome back to Making the Argument. We've got a very interesting episode for you today because I'm interviewing somebody that I met a while back, um, who's, let's say, going through a bit of a fight with the government. Go figure. And the reason why he's going through this fight with the government is because, as a decorated and celebrated member of the Virginia National Guard, somebody that has served his country and his Commonwealth with distinction, they're trying to kick him out now. And here's the deal. Sometimes people do stupid things and they get kicked out. But the reason why he's getting kicked out is because he started a local civic organization that works with his local sheriff to do all sorts of things with respect to first aid training, with respect to disaster response, with respect to land navigation, marksmanship, all of these things that I think most people would consider to be the sort of stuff that a responsible citizen concerned about his community would do. And yet, it's the very reason why this Virginia National Guard Soldier of the Year is going to get kicked out of the military. And that sounds absurd to people. Like there's got to be more to the story. Well, there is. There's one more thing to the story, and that's one word. And that's the word militia. Because unfortunately, like so many other words that should mean one thing, especially when you consider the important historical context of that word, it has been hijacked and it has now been used as a pejorative. And if you use the word militia, well, then clearly you must be some sort of separatist crazy out there, instead of maybe somebody that wants to reclaim a word that was absolutely essential, not only to our founding, but an active part of our history for well over 100 years in this country. And that is the reason why Dan Abbott is getting kicked out of the military, or at least they're trying, but he's fighting back. And maybe the real reason why they're so mad at him is, instead of just rolling over and saying, okay, I'm sorry, I'll change the name, or I'll disband the organization, he said, no, I think this is important. And so he decided to risk quite a bit for his convictions. And quite frankly, that's the sort of guy I want to be serving in the military. So Dan, thank you very much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, this is a pending case, right? Like there's things going on right now. You're fighting back on this, and and just so I'm not going to find out 5 minutes from now that actually you had a Facebook page full of posts about how you were going to overthrow the United States government. Can you please tell the audience just a little bit about your history and maybe kick off what all of a sudden caused the problem? Because you were doing this for a while, no problems, and then now all of a sudden it's become an issue. So tell us a little bit about again your history and what was the starting point of all the ruckus going on now.
Yeah. So, yeah, my history, I was raised in rural America, so I was raised to bleed red, white, and blue. This was America. That's what we did. I was real involved with like fire and EMS, search and rescue, stuff like that, as a young man right out of high school and college and whatever. And actually, when I originally enlisted in the military, I was looking at Coast Guard to supplement the search and rescue side of things, and they were not hiring. So I came in on a 18X contract to active duty Army, and what I wanted was the Delta program,
Mm.
because I thought it would bolster my ability to help people and to practice emergency medicine and whatever.
Well, and just to give everyone an idea too, the 18 X-ray program is especially going into special forces, and 18 Delta specifically SF medics. And SF medics go through extensive medical training. So sorry, I just wanted to make sure the audience knew what we were all talking about.
Sure. And so I wound up washing out of the Q course after a year and a half, and I went to 82nd Airborne Division, which is where most of those guys go. So I spent a bunch of time there on active duty, and then when I left active duty, I came to the Virginia State Guard, or the National Guard, and I've been here since 2018. And
Real quick, let me ask you a question. What unit in the 82nd?
3rd Brigade, 1st of the 505th.
Oh, okay, all right. So you were a Panther.
One Panther. Yep, you got
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I was the second of the 325 guys. I was a White Falcon.
Ugh.
I was not a Blue Falcon, a White Falcon. So you did, how many years did you do in the 82nd?
Well, I was 5 years active duty, so
Yeah.
whatever that was that I washed out of the Q course, which I think would have been 2014.
And
So
to give everyone an idea too, like honestly, so most people don't make it through the Q course.
Mhm.
And a higher percentage of 18 X-rays don't make it through the Q course because they're coming directly in. So a lot of guys, what ends up happening, they go to the 18 X-ray program, they sign up for that. They make it through select. I mean, you made it through selection, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's like the first step.
Mhm.
And then a lot of guys don't end up making it through the Q course because it's the first time in the military. They go off to an infantry unit or somewhere else. And if they decide that they want to go back, a lot of guys end up going back to the Q course and going through. But it's not at all unusual for someone to not be able to. What phase of the Q course?
MOS.
Oh, Delta.
Now, MOS for Echo.
Okay. The comms guy. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, which
So yeah, so I just want everyone to know, like, this is not an unusual thing
no.
to take place. So you go to the 82nd Airborne Division, again, a great unit, premier. I served in the 82nd and for gosh, I guess about 3 years. And then you get out so what year do you come to the Guard?
18. I actually did the
2018.
Trial
Okay.
1 program, which is like a National Guard extension to your active duty contract, so you have no break in service.
Oh, really? Okay, that's pretty cool. All right.
Yep.
All right, so you come over to the National Guard and you're serving in the 29th Infantry?
No, I reclassed MOS, so I went to 180th Engineer Support Company, and yeah, I bounced around a little bit with MTC. I spent a little bit of time with the BEB, and wound up at Fort Barfoot with
Okay.
range operations.
Okay, good deal. Good deal. And at what time? So they ended up tagging you for going to the Soldier of the Year program, right?
Well, yeah, I'd actually my first year here, which would have been, I guess that would have been 2018 or 19, something like that. I went to Soldier of the Year, and I'll be honest with you, my head and heart were not in it, and I ended up withdrawing partway through the competition. Part of the reason I left the 82nd is I was just burned out.
Yeah.
And came here and it's like, oh, we're going to do the same thing I was doing in division. I was like, I was just burned out. And so I ended up withdrawing from the competition. But then I went back again in 23. I'd had time to get my head right, and I wanted to go back.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing very, very well. I won the state competition. I won the Region 2, which is basically the Mid-Atlantic regional competition, and went to the national competition in Alaska. I placed number 3 in the nation.
Wow. I went to a a similar competition, the 82nd. I almost made it through the company round. No, that's great. That's great. No, and again, for people that are wondering what like the Soldier of the Year competitions and whatnot, it's usually a series of things that have everything to do with, dress and appearance, physical fitness, marksmanship, general military knowledge, like all of that. It's kind of this idea of a very well-rounded balance between the physical, the intellectual, the knowledge component. And again, I've known some people that have done very, very well. I remember I served with the 82nd Airborne Division Soldier of the Year and whatnot. And again, it's a distinction. It's a distinction. So you did that in 2023.
Correct.
So all right. So that, again, we're not talking that long ago. We're not taking ancient history here. Right. So, how do you go from the guy that the Commonwealth of Virginia, and specifically the Virginia National Guard, is shipping off to go to national level competitions to show off your soldier badassery to a guy that they're all mad at?
Well, that's a good question. I never thought that would happen. Not without me doing something to screw up. But going all the way back to 2020, I saw an opportunity there. So after the lobby day and that whole fiasco, you started seeing these public militia musters, spring up. And I went to a couple of those, mostly out of curiosity. And then, of course, we had one in my community, so I went to that one, and there was a box check for if you're interested in leadership. I was like, you know what, let's see what this is about, like what these guys are trying to do here. And so I went to one of those, and it was like, wow, like this is a bunch of like-minded people that just care about their community, and they're recognizing that the Constitution or the Bill of Rights says that this is necessary to the security of a free state. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we really do need to be taking a harder look at what this should be. And I realized, wow, I have inadvertently stumbled into a group of men who are absolutely dedicated to preserving and protecting their communities, that take their responsibility as Christian men very, very seriously. and they see this as a way to protect their community in a corporate manner or as a community.
Yeah.
Um, and
Well, and
so I started plugging in, and we started doing trainings on medical trainings and firearm safety and search and rescue, and I mean basically you name it. That was the training model wound up being that we're trying to build better citizens.
yeah.
Um, you know, First responders are great. I spent a whole bunch of time as a firefighter and a medic, and I spent time on active duty serving my nation. I've spent time in the National Guard serving my state. And first responders are great. They're fantastic, and we need them. But what's even better are immediate responders, which
Mm,
are the people that are there when something happens.
mhm.
Because whether we like it or not, bad things are going to happen, and we as Christian men should see it as a responsibility to be ultimately well trained to
Mhm.
deal with bad things that happen. Um, and that's everything from being able to put food on our tables to being able to treat medical injuries in a car accident, and having a good understanding of how fire and law enforcement works so that we can help them direct traffic. And
Well, real quick. So what year did you get involved?
2020.
Okay, so this is another very important point, right? So
Mhm.
2020, you get involved,
Mhm.
and again, you get involved because you saw an organization that you thought was, taking their constitutional obligations seriously. Because you're right, in the Second Amendment, it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the
Mhm.
right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But it was that acknowledgement, and I think it's also important to understand that people have this notion that the National Guard took over the role of the militia, and that comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what the militia represented from the earliest of colonial times, all the way until later. I'm like, yes, there were state militias, but the earliest manifestations of the militia within Virginia and whatnot was not a state-run organization; they were community-based organizations.
Mhm.
And it was for exactly what you said. I mean, it wasn't just about the fact that the frontier was a dangerous place. It was also about the fact that when you needed people to come together in order to fight a fire or get something done, the
Exactly.
militia was the go-to place to do that. It's
Exactly.
just that there was also a martial component,
Mhm.
and which again should be something that I think should be more ingrained in society. Like, one of the big things we talk about is we want men to be protectors and providers. Well,
Right.
the militia actually provided a sense of corporate protection that
Exactly.
was not only, military, or martial in the sense that it was conducting military operations, but it also performed a law enforcement function in earlier times,
Yeah.
and just a practical function.
Mhm.
And so again, you find an organization that believes in this stuff, and the caricature is always the same thing, right? Bunch of fat racist white guys running around the woods with camo that doesn't match,
Mhm.
and flagging each other by with their rifles. But you found one that was actually trying to actually be well regulated, well trained,
Mhm.
and actually serving a function in coordination with local sheriff, local first responders. I mean, is that an accurate description?
It is, and I don't think it's quite as simple as that. I just found one, but that I also had input with the
Mhm.
development of that organization, and
Mm.
I think that's the way that it should be, particularly as as guardsmen or as leaders of our communities. If these organizations are going to exist, why should we not be involved with steering those ships, in trying to impact the way that they manifest and the way that they develop and the involvement that they have in their communities.
Okay.
So I saw
Yeah.
it as an opportunity that, hey, this is something that I can plug into. This is a way that I can really have an impact on my community. And so I did.
And so when I say working in coordination with sheriff and what, do you guys have a relationship with, like, local sheriff, local first responders?
I would say that we have a bulletproof relationship with not just our local sheriff, but the sheriffs of the other neighboring counties. We have outstanding relationships. Um, we have a bulletproof relationship with our board of supervisors. In fact, the we have a number. Most of the board members actually are members of CCM, and a number of them are very, very involved.
Yeah.
One of them is actually an officer in our organization.
Mhm.
So yeah, we have an outstanding relationship with both local law enforcement and local government. And from a sheriff's perspective, if you're the sheriff, doesn't it make a whole lot of sense to have a pool of volunteer manpower that you only need to make one phone call to access?
Yeah.
You know, if you need 6 or 8 guys to help you direct traffic, you don't have to call 6 or 8. You make
Yeah.
one phone call.
Well, and I think people too, they especially people in urban areas that, this is just not a thing that typically exists in those urban areas, right? And interestingly enough, even earlier American history, right? The manifestation of the militia took on, different appearances based off of, how urban the area was versus how
Right.
rural it was out of necessity. But yeah, to your point, it was the idea that we still have a lot of people in urban areas that they expect, their law enforcement or whatnot to do everything. It's actually a little bit tragic when you get into an urban area and neighbors have no concept, nor capability, nor any sense of responsibility to really help anyone except kind of like maybe their own immediate, neighbor at best.
Yeah.
Whereas you get into some of these rural areas where, you're out in the middle of nowhere. And if something bad happens, you're right next door, but the police are 30 minutes away. And that's assuming that your department, your sheriff's department, which probably only has maybe 4 people on duty at any given time, is not already answering a call somewhere else. And so this is such a practical thing in certain environments that just is not well respected. Now, let's be honest. There are some groups out there that fit the description I mentioned before, which is fat white guys running around in the woods with, mismatched camo that don't know what the heck they're doing. And I think you saw times in the 90s where you had people that seemed a little bit off the rocker coming to testify to Congress about militias.
Yep.
But you would think that that's even more reason for somebody that knows what they're doing, understands the proper role of it, to try to get involved and make sure that an organization actually lives up to the high standards that a militia like this should live up to.
Yeah. I was actually investigated after January 6th. I was on orders for that Capitol response mission.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was probably the DC Capitol Police that started that sort of fracas. But I had a conversation with a very, very senior officer in the state of Virginia. And he basically came to talk to me as like, hey, look, they're saying you're involved in this militia. Spill it. What's the deal with this? What's going on? And so I explained it to him. And one of the things that I said was, I said, hey, I went to some of these musters, and how I look at it is, if these organizations are going to exist, which they are, whether I like it or I don't, who better to try to lead and steer those ships than me.
Yeah.
And he thought about it, man. He said, you know what? He said, you're exactly right. That's a great thought.
And now I want to introduce you to a brand new partner of the Making the Argument podcast. Look, let's be honest. Prices haven't just gone up. They've launched into orbit. And if you're like most Americans, you've probably had to lean on credit cards just to cover essentials like gas or the power bill at some point. But if you own a home, American Financing can help. They're a family-owned mortgage lender that's been around for 25 years and are licensed in all 50 states. They help homeowners use their home's equity to pay off high-interest debt, and their customers save about $800 a month on average. Their consultants aren't on commission, so they're not trying to sell you something you don't need. There's no upfront or hidden fees, and thanks to in-house underwriting, you may be able to close in as fast as 10 days and maybe even delay 2 mortgage payments. So stop drowning in interest and call 888-961-4143. That's 888-961-4143, or go to americanfinancing.net/MTA, NMLS 182334. So they deployed you up in response because and just so everyone knows, when January 6th, kicked off, and even before, like President Trump had requested to bring in, National Guard and security in order to keep the peace. Nancy Pelosi refused. The mayor of DC didn't want it. I think in part because they wanted something to kick off. But, so the Virginia National Guard was obviously, due to proximity, was one of the organizations that was called up to go up and assist. So you were brought up for that. And then they asked about it. They asked about this organization that you belong to. Mm-hmm. And at that point, your command, did your command say, hey, look, you're going to have to leave this organization, or what happened?
No, not at all. In fact, after a long conversation with a very, very senior officer, he told me point blank, he said, I want you on the ground if anything ever does happen. He said, we need men like you in a uniform, and I'm going to do everything I can to get you back in D.C. before inauguration. Now, that never happened because the D.C. Capitol Police had a problem with it.
Yeah.
But my chain of command in Virginia was staunchly on the side of soldiers and on the side of the Constitution.
Okay, great. So, all right. So you have that little thing, DC's worried, and obviously they were, they were, they were heightened awareness at that particular point, and they painted with a very, very broad brush. I mean, we saw this afterwards, especially with some of the people that did get caught up on January 6th. Now, there were some people that legitimately destroyed property, trespassed,
Absolutely.
broke the law. I'm not
Yep.
defending any of that. There were
Nope.
other people that were just in proximity. I just had a constituent who, like, 3 years after the fact, black Suburbans knocking down his door, treating him like he's, frigging bin Laden. And the judge ended up dismissing that with prejudice. And for those who don't understand, that doesn't happen nearly, or doesn't happen a whole lot. But the dismiss with prejudice is not just, we don't find that you have a sufficient case to bring. It's, we don't find you have a sufficient case and you're a jackass. I can't believe you
Right.
even did this, right? That's dismissed with prejudice. So, all right. So it's not like you got arrested. It's not like you got detained. It's not like you got demoted. It's not like you got, you were in trouble with anything. Your chain of command seemed to support you. So that's 2020. Fast forward 2 years later, they're not only putting you up for, Soldier of the Year. You go through that whole process. You win. You win regionals, and you're competing at nationals. So clearly, they've had knowledge that you were a member.
Oh yeah.
This has been investigated. It's come to their attention. They've backed you. They've, again, put you in a position, because the other thing too to understand about Soldier of the Year, for those of you who don't know, that ends up being kind of a prestigious, tour of, look at the example of the best of the National Guard, right? That's what the point is. So they've done all this with this knowledge. What happened? Like, okay, did somebody in your group decide that, they were going to overthrow the United States government, or did you suddenly decide that, you were ready to storm the Capitol? Like, what happened?
Well, there was an article that came out in military.com, which was ultimately, yeah, I know, the
Oh my
fine
gosh.
publication that is military.com,
Yeah.
that it ultimately it just slandered me, accused me of being, some kind of violent, anti-government, anti-American, racist, compared to the KKK. I mean, basically, you name it.
What did they base that on?
They based it on the opinions of my wife's ex.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's that simple. Someone is childish and just
Did they have like a bunch of screenshots from Facebook where you were, talking about how much you liked the Third Reich? Like, what was going on? Like,
no, literally just absolutely nothing, like fabricated out of thin air.
wow.
Just literally blind accusations from someone who is a proclaimed extremist hunter in the military.
Wow.
And yeah, just literally made blind and baseless accusations.
So this was one of those things where, and I remember, I remember seeing the Military Times article on this, and thinking it looked a lot like
Military.com.
military.com, apologize. I remember thinking it looked a little bit like a hit piece, because you would think if anybody was going to make accusations like this, especially against somebody that's like a Soldier of the Year, you would think there would be some sort of smoking gun, right? Like there would be either charges, or there would be some sort of, like, again, a multitude of screenshots of you saying stupid things online. But instead, I'm looking at this going, all right, so
Where's the
it,
story?
it well, it looked like it was focused on innuendo, right? It was a bunch of accusations for which they couldn't provide, anything that I could see of as significant concrete evidence that you had done something wrong or bad, or, conduct unbecoming. I didn't see anything like that, but it was pushing off this idea where you have this heightened sense of concern.
Mhm.
You have this heightened sense of this association with militia, with bad and evil and white supremacy, and whatever, all that stuff. And it's like that's what they were kind of relying on. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking, because look, Dan, you're not the first person to call me up and say, "Hey, can we talk about something?" I've had people before where they're claiming like, I was done wrong, and I'm looking, I'm like, but were you? But
Yeah.
were you done wrong? And look, you've done some stupid stuff, right? But I'm sitting here going through it, and I'm like, look, and I don't know, Dan, maybe we'll get off of this podcast, and the next thing I'll know, there'll be a report saying about what a horrible guy you are, with tons of evidence. But to date, like, I haven't seen anything to that effect.
Yeah.
So do you think this was, well, I don't want to ask you to speculate. because this was coming out, what this was late 2023. I'm trying to remember when the article came out.
So that article actually came out beginning of middle of 24.
Okay.
And it was
So
it
height of a presidential year election.
Yeah, it came out at the exact same time that the Army released its new anti-extremism policy, which was, in my opinion, all too convenient. But
yeah, no more white guys too extreme.
Yeah, no, we can't have that.
Yeah. Okay, so so they released this new policy, and now all of a sudden, the same National Guard that knew you were a part of this organization, had already been brought their attention, supported you, put you up, to compete in the Soldier of the Year, won regionals, went all over the nation. Now all of a sudden,
Nick, not just all over the nation. I mean, I got to stand on the beaches of Normandy holding the national colors in front of the chief of the bureau. Like,
wow.
I attained what is arguably like the highest honor that a uniformed service member can attain, to hold the national colors on foreign soil as the sacrifice of American soldiers is honored.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah. Wait, and they don't offer that up to people that they're concerned are like, a threat to, the safety of the country. So this article comes out, military.com, which don't get me started on military.com, but this article comes on military.com. And now all of a sudden it's a major issue, right? Who is the first to contact you to say, did they ask for an explanation? Did they want to talk to you? Was it just, hey, you need to disband this or leave it, or what? How did that go?
I found out about it because the reporter from military.com was harassing my wife and I. She is also a very, very distinguished shooter. She's one of the top shooters in the world, wins international competitions on behalf of the United States Army. And this reporter was harassing us. And so I reached out to my chain of command and said, hey, I don't know how to deal with these guys. Can I talk to public affairs, JAG, whatever?
You did what you're supposed to do in that situation.
Exactly. And so, my chain of command was very supportive. They said, yeah, absolutely. Here, I'll get you contact numbers for who you need to talk to. And so I started having conversations with JAG, and they can't talk to me. And I'm like, well, what's going on here? And basically I was told, like, hey, I can't talk to you. I'll find someone that can. And the phone hangs up. I was like, that sounds an awful lot like I'm under investigation.
Yeah.
So I contacted my chain of command and said, hey, sounds like I'm under investigation. He says, oh, there's no way. I'm the commander. I would have to know if there was a, commander's inquiry. I'm just telling you, sir, that's what it sounded like. So yeah, sure enough, I was under investigation, and they apparently executed a lengthy investigation without really even having a conversation with me. They certainly didn't care about the opinions of my chain of command or the people that work with me.
And what did they find? What did the investigation find?
They issued me a GOMAR, General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand, and basically the GOMAR calls into question my patriotism. We doubt your commitment to your oath of enlistment.
But based on what did they give you? I mean, did they justify in the order why they were making that decision or why they were questioning that?
Part of the thrust with CCM is education, and part of that is trying to overcome that negative stigma that has been built around militia, and part of it is just trying to educate people as to their civic duty as Americans and as Christian men to be involved and to steer the ship. And so I teach like lectures and seminars and stuff on constitutional militia, what it looks like, how it works, and like its relationship with government and people. And one of those lectures, I was using an example. You had mentioned earlier that like one of the jobs of militia is to help with law enforcement. And actually, if you look at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 to the U.S. Constitution, it says that Congress shall call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, repel invasion, and suppress insurrection. And of course, the U.S. Constitution being the supreme law of the land, that's part of the responsibility of constitutional, well-regulated militia. And so I was using an example where if the state was at odds with government or with local government, at odds with the people, that there should be force of arms that is in the hands of local government. And they don't like that analogy at all, because the idea that militia could be used to restrain the power of government or to prevent tyranny, they have a serious issue with that. So they
Well,
painted the
and
picture.
that is I think I recently just got in a floor debate with, Delegate Dan Helmer, and he kept using this term, weapons of war, weapons of war, weapons of war. And I said, well, first of all, the weapons that are included in your thing don't include, there's a lot of things in that don't even fall into the category of weapons of war. But even then, so what? Because the Second Amendment wasn't written after a robust hunting trip. It was written after a revolution. And one of the things that the founders were really worried about two things: standing armies and mercenaries.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons why they thought a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state was so important, right? Second thing they wrote, right, in the Bill of Rights. And we people get very, very uncomfortable with this idea that one of the reasons why you have an armed citizenry is to be able to stand up against tyranny. And that tyranny, and I don't know, the oath I swore to the Constitution was all enemies, foreign and domestic. It's this idea that, whoa, no, my gosh, of course you could never take up arms against your own government. Well, you certainly shouldn't do that for transient or passive reasons. But if you had a federal government that decided to run roughshod over the Constitution, well, then, yeah, you would absolutely have a responsibility to stand up to that. And guess what? I'm old enough to remember 47 seconds ago when Trump got elected the first time and California was saying, we're a nation, not a state. Like, are you suggesting insurrection because you believe in, he's going to, usurp constitutional authority? So it's like, spare me. Right. Spare me all of this concern. Obviously, if you were sitting there just like wantonly suggesting that anytime we don't like what the feds do, it's time to go march on DC, that would be problematic. But why shouldn't you use an analogy that the founders, the people that wrote the Constitution, would have been not only comfortable with, they would have insisted upon it.
And I think that furthermore, they would have considered me to have not gone nearly far enough, because if you look at, like the Federalist Papers, Madison actually says that if a standing army is to be maintained, that well-regulated militias should be maintained at a strength that is 20 times greater than the standing army, to ensure that a standing army can never be used to abuse the people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's, you listen to as our own debates within the Constitution here in Virginia, and we have Article 1, Section 13, and you have George Mason talking about what is the militia. Pretty much every able-bodied man between, certain ages, that's the militia. And, again, we've grown uncomfortable with this because of some of the negative stigma, some of it, appropriate, not toward the word militia, but certainly toward the organizations that have abused that term. But also because, again, we've grown into a society that is pretty far separated from the time where they actually saw and regularly engaged with the militia. And again, I think a lot of things happened in 2020 that caused us to question a lot of the things that we kind of took for granted. I know, for instance, if you would have told me I would be super interested in homesteading before 2020, I would have said you were nuts. A garden, sure, chickens, great. But that was it. What was the big deal? And then all of a sudden it was like, oh no, I never want to be in a position again where I don't know if my family can eat, if the grocery store isn't open, right? And then you start to dig a little deeper and you start finding out that a lot of the institutions that I was told to blindly follow and trust deliberately lied to me about everything from medicine to safety procedures to whether or not I could go to church. And I think a lot of people became necessarily and appropriately not only skeptical of some of the things we were being told, but skeptical of some of the stigma that we were expected to have about local institutions that, again, our founders would have considered absolutely necessary.
Yeah, not only did they consider that, they said that.
Yeah. Over and over. Well, okay. So all right, they come to you now and now they're giving you a general order of reprimand. Did you get any opportunity to potentially defend yourself against any of these accusations?
So after they read me the Gomar, they asked if I had anything to say. At that point, I felt that we were way too far down the road. I felt like I was being targeted, like this was a witch hunt, because they did not come to me and ask me. I mean, the first thing I would do, like I'm a staff sergeant. When I have an issue with a soldier, the first thing I'm doing is going to that dude and be like, hey man, we need to talk.
Yeah.
And because that never happened, because they did not involve my chain of command, because they deliberately shut my chain of command out of the equation, I felt like I was being targeted.
Yeah.
And so I had my lawyer with me. I just turned to my lawyer and he said, no, we have nothing to say this time. We'll respond in writing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I did inquire about this and I was like, what is the deal? And it was like, oh, well, our legal team has determined that, you can't, you can't belong to that the guard fulfills certain roles. I'm not quoting him verbatim. So nobody, I don't want to do, I know various members of the National Guard and senior command of the National Guard, obviously as a state legislator, I know them. And I've always had a good working relationship. We haven't always agreed, but I've always had a good working relationship. So I don't want to misrepresent. But one of the things that I had been told was that it was the legal opinion or counsel's opinion that belonging to a militia like this that was not recognized by the state or by the federal government or whatnot conflicted with your ability to serve in the Virginia National Guard. Now, again, counsel can come up with whatever opinion they want, but I do find it interesting that counsel didn't come to that conclusion in 2020 when they originally knew you were a part of this. And it was only in 2024, at the height of a presidential election year, at the height of everybody screaming, threat to democracy, at a time where the Biden administration took a view of the military and treated it abysmally, that all of a sudden this becomes a major issue that has to be addressed, where you get a general or reprimand without even being able to defend yourself prior to the reprimand being issued and signed.
In the GOMAR, like they didn't really pursue anything past the GOMAR. My legal team responded in writing and said, really, we think this is bunk. Like, what is this nonsense? And then a few months later, they come out with the policy, which you were talking about there a minute ago, which prohibits simultaneous membership in more than one component of the Virginia militia. So you can't.
And so this was just a policy they developed.
What's that?
This is just a policy they developed on the Guard level or the National Guard Bureau level, or what was it?
It's a Guard level. It's TAG policy 70-25.
So the TAG just came up with it.
Correct.
Okay, so the TAG just comes up with this policy, and now all of a sudden you're being told, okay, because of this new policy, you will either leave this militia or you will leave the Guard.
Correct.
And so you decided to challenge it.
Yeah, we did. We my legal team challenged the legality. And honestly, how do I even resign from being a member of the whole body of the people, males ages 16 to 55? Like, right. I don't even know how to do that. Like,
well, here's what I think is crazy. And we talked about this because I remember asking you, one of the things I asked you was, I said, look, man, my goal here is to help you. Because you seem like a stand-up guy. Your record certainly suggests that you are. I can't find anything that you've done that I think is wrong or immoral. One of the solutions is you're no longer the militia, you're the civic organization, or you're the, rapid response team, or you're whatever else, but you're not a militia. There you go. And I remember you saying, look, I'm sorry, but this is wrong on a fundamental level. And I'm going to fight it. And I was like, all right, dude, let's do it.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I'm saying all this because I want people to understand how much credit that I think you and, Alex are owed for being willing. You guys could have really taken the easy way out on this. Super easy way out.
Yeah, and there's two reasons that I can't do that, Nick. One of them is exactly what you just said. For me, like, this is a matter of principle. Like, I absolutely believe in my heart that when I swore to support and defend the Constitution and bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and the Constitution says that well-regulated militia made up of the whole body of the people is necessary, well, then that's where I'm going to stand, and I'm not going to budge. And the other thing is, I'm not going to forsake the community that I am part of, the friends that I had built through my church and through my community, and turn my back on them because the state says that I should. Nor am I going to lie to everyone and say, "Oh yeah, I'm resigning. I'm not going to be involved," and resign from the militia.
Yeah,
I can't do that. It's a matter of principle, and that's not who I am.
Well, I mean, again, I think it demonstrates integrity. I think also what happens on some of these things is, look, the military is the military. I did 11 years active duty. I did a couple of years guard, and typically on something like this, what ends up happening is feathers get ruffled, and they expect you to kind of stand down, and then when you don't, they want to fight it, and I think sometimes heels get dug in places where they just shouldn't. Um, and again, I'm sorry that you guys have to go through this, but I'm also encouraged that we have people that are willing to do it, right? That are willing to go through with it. And let me ask you this: what is the current status?
So currently, I am pending a deadline of April 7th, which is my deadline to respond. I've been notified that I'm being separated for misconduct. And I have till the 7th to respond to that with whether I'm just going to accept the separation or whether I'm going to request a separation board.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, look, I appreciate you being willing to come on and talk about this. There's a lot of people that, if they're undergoing something like this, their legal counsel and everyone else is going to tell them to be quiet, to do the easy thing, to do whatnot. And what we've also seen, though, is at some point people need to understand what's actually going on instead of what they get through military.com. Because any journalist that's an actual journalist would have actually been, it's amazing because they're so quick to try to, if they wanted a really good story about a strong woman in the military, your wife fits the bill perfectly, but instead they chose to harass her and by proxy, harass, both of you as a result. And it just goes to show that for all of the talk emanating from some of these groups about who they pretend to care about, what you end up finding out is they only care about you if you walk in line with their political ideology.
Correct.
The moment you're the perfect representation of everything they claim to want, but then you take a principled stance on something that doesn't align with their political values. Oh, now all of a sudden you're the enemy, you're the bad guy, you're a traitor, you're all this other stuff. And it's just ridiculous. And you guys could have avoided all of this by keeping your heads down and just going out and moving forward. But look, you chose to fight, and I think people need to know what's going on, and I think you deserve to be able to get out your side of the story on this. And again, if the military wants to come out and actually be honest about what's going on and why they've come to these decisions and why it was that the soldier of the year that they already knew was in this organization was suddenly, a representation of misconduct. Well, good. Come out here and give us your story, and let's see what happens in the court of public opinion. But I hope what's going to happen is we've already seen significant shifts in the military, necessary shifts that I am incredibly grateful for that have happened during the Trump administration with Pete Hegseth and with others, with Driscoll. And so I hope that we're going to see a culture change in the military, which again doesn't look at somebody that's willing to stand on principle, that has a pristine military record, and kicks them out over what amounts to not misconduct, but what amounts to political differences. Because I've said it once and I'll say it again. When you are not willing to have the back of the people that have sworn oath to protect and defend you, the moment it becomes politically inconvenient, then not only have we proven ourselves completely unworthy of the people that swear that oath and put on that uniform, but we've actually discouraged the sort of character that we want in the people that wear it. Right. And so, to Alex, thank you guys for being willing to, sacrifice something for what you care about, what you believe in. Where can people find out more? Can people follow you on X, on Facebook? Where can people follow you guys to kind of figure out, find out what's going on and maybe offer you guys some support?
Well, I've been deplatformed from everything Meta. So, I am on X. I'm not a very skilled or prolific user of X, at least not yet. We do have a give, send, go because this is the legal battles cost more than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
On X, also like CCM has a website. You can definitely get in touch with me by going to campbellmilitia.com. Nick, I'll give out my cell phone number if people want to talk to me.
Don't do that. You're going to get some people that call and want to help. You're going to get other calls too. So
I'm tracking whatever.
Yeah, but listen, Dan, thank you again for coming on and telling your story. And again, I'll offer it up to the Virginia National Guard. You want to make your case on why you think Dan needs to be kicked out? I'll listen. I don't know that I'm going to agree. You're going to have to show evidence, which, quite frankly, the military.com failed to do. And so far, I've seen others fail to do. And again, I think yours is a story that deserves to be told, and I hope this will generate some more interest in it. So thank you for sharing that. Once again, thank all of you for watching. Go check out those pages that Dan mentioned. Go over there, give it a like and a follow. And look, you don't got to take my word for it. You don't got to take Dan's word for it. Go out there and research, learn, and really come to an understanding of where you fall on this issue, because ultimately it's not just about Dan and Alex. It is about a kind of a deeper concept that goes back to our historical roots, and one that I do hope will be socially and culturally rehabilitated. But if we want to do that, it's actually going to take guys like Dan. It's going to take women like Alex, who are willing to actually once again make this institution what it's always meant to be, what it's always supposed to have been, and which was absolutely critical to our founding and the sustainment of our republic. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next episode.